I am the global lead for the Business and Human Rights Accelerator, which is really alive and well across about 57 countries at the moment. But the presentation today is broader than the accelerator. I also want to share a little bit of information about some of the other resources that we also have available for yourselves as Global Compact members, but also some of the tools are actually open tools. So you're also welcome to share them with other companies that are not necessarily part of the Global Compact. Yeah, so as I said, I lead, I work with the New York office, but working across many of the countries. And prior to actually coming to the Global Compact, I worked in business for many, many years across various departments, from communication to marketing, sustainability, corporate affairs. So I have a really good understanding of how this actually plays out in the business environment and the challenges and the complexities that go with implementing and embedding human rights across the organization. So really an appreciation for how difficult and complex that actually is. So I'll move into the slides now. Diego, I don't know if perhaps we can stop in between for questions, or maybe I will stop after a few slides and see if there's any questions that come up. I'm not sure if I'll be able to see the questions while I'm presenting, so I'll...
I don't know, probably it's better to let the questions for the end of the session.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
So it's more fluid. You're muted, Nicole. There you go.
So I'm much more familiar with Zoom, so
Yeah.
excuse me. So you will all know that the UN Global Compact is the biggest corporate sustainability initiative. And, tens of thousands of businesses have signed up voluntarily to the 10 principles, and of course to progress the Sustainable Development Goals as well. We really, as the Business and Human Rights Desk, we're really looking at the Global Compact 10 principles, and then also how that impacts the Sustainable Development Goals. As I said, we really have an excellent scope across more than 160 countries, lots of these local network hubs that are implementing the programmatic work of the Global Compact, and then, of course, many millions of employees being impacted because they are part of the businesses that are part of the Global Compact. And so apologies, it keeps on. There we go. So also you will know that with the principles-based approach, the 10 Global Compact principles cover human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And so the work that I'll talk about today really covers 6 of those principles across human rights and labor. And then we also have the mandate to progress the Sustainable Development Goals. But what is really cool about it is that 92% of the 169 Sustainable Development Goal targets are actually linked to the human rights instrument. So as you progress the human rights journey in your organization, you are also progressing the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and vice versa. So these are very much interlinked. And so as you work on human rights, know that you are also progressing the Sustainable Development Goals. We ask ourselves, why is this important? Because human rights is at risk globally. All the time, you see it when you switch on your TV, you can see what's happening in the world currently. When we look at social media, you will note the human rights abuses that occur across the world. And so these are just a few of those statistics. I mean, 1 in 10 children still subject to child labor, almost 25 million trapped in forced labor. That could be, that number could be more. Over 1 billion people working, earning less than they need to afford a decent standard of living. And of course, women still earning on average 20% less than men. These are just some of the statistics globally that we still face, and you will see many, many more of those, as you go about your daily lives. And as I mentioned in the event on Tuesday, A colleague of mine says, if you are human, you're an expert in human rights because you know how you want to be treated. And so it is not something out there. It's not something existential. It is something that affects all of us on a daily basis. So that really takes us to why is it important for business? So if you as a business ignore all of these issues, there are going to be some major risks for you as a business. But if you take up and are proactive in your approach to human rights, there are absolutely opportunities for your business as well. And so some of the risks, I think the most obvious risk is probably the reputational harm. You'll see something in the news, company name, so-and-so is doing this. And that might be the first time you even see that your name is attached to some human rights risk or abuse. And so the point is to be proactive and to know what those risks are so that you don't get a fright the day that you see your company name in the newspaper attached to a certain risk. So reputational harm is probably one that we notice the most, but of course, operational disruption and delay, reduced staff retention, litigation and complaints, and the list goes on. This is not an exhaustive list. There are many more risks to business. Then if we look at the opportunities, if you are proactive, and we know that employees are now looking for businesses that are proactive in managing their risks, that are shown to be sustainable, you will be the employer of choice. So employees, especially young, talented employees, will hopefully look at your organization and say, they seem to be doing the right thing. This is somewhere where I can align my values and I can work for that organization. And in that way, you are future-proofing your business. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when it comes to the legislation. How do you future-proof your business for the legislation that is on its way? You do so by aligning yourself with the Global Compact, with the principles, and with the UN guiding principles. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. So when we look at those 10 Global Compact principles, of course, the first two talk directly about human rights. Number one says business should support and respect the protection of internationally proclaimed human rights. And number two says make sure that you are not complicit in human rights abuses. So your responsibility as an organization, but also what is happening in your value chain. Do you know it? And are you complicit in other organizations or other businesses that may be impacting or in human rights abuses? So you need to know for yourself as an organization, but also for those business relationships that you are in. I'm going to quickly move to the next slide. Because here, just to look at the principles 3, 4, 5, and 6, they talk directly to the labor principles. And here we're looking at business should uphold the freedom of association and effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. So the right to that collective voice, the elimination of all forms of forced labor, the effective abolition of child labor, and the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. So these are the first 6 of the 10 principles. So when your CEO signs that statement of commitment to the UN Global Compact, you are committing to these 10 principles. Now, the good news is that there is a way to operationalize these principles. And so I'll go back to the previous slide because we have the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. It's an authoritative global framework for preventing and addressing adverse business-related human rights. So this is a tool that you can use to help you address those 6 principles that you've committed to. The 3 principles of the 3 pillars, at least, of the UN guiding principles. Number 1 is the state duty to protect human rights. So that is government's responsibility. Number 2 is the corporate responsibility to respect human rights. So that is as business, your responsibility. And then number 3 is about access to remedy. So if these things do occur, what is your response? How are you remedying? How are you putting people back into the situation they were before this this human rights abuse occurred. So that takes us to the three pillars. Now, when we look at these three pillars, again, how do we as the Global Compact support you as business to actually operationalize, make this alive inside your organization, that it's not just a report that you're reading, or it's not just a website that you're looking at, or it's not just Local Network Portugal that's talking about it. And there we want to, before we move on to how we do that, is we all know the legislation that is either in place in some areas or on its way. And so this is a real conundrum for business. How does this affect me as an organization? And how can the Global Compact support me to be ready? So I mentioned earlier, future-proofing your business. There are many legislative pieces around the world, and we see how that's been evolving since about 2011. And the good thing about this is a lot of this legislation is actually based on the UN guiding principles and the OECD guidelines. So you know that if you're aligning yourself with these guidelines and principles, you're actually future-proofing your business for the legislation that is going to be coming up. So it's really important to know that as the Global Compact, we don't give legal advice, but we do give you the principles and the practical application so that you can ensure that your business is compliant when it comes to the legislation. So how do we support you as business, and what are the programs and the resources that we have available to support you on this journey? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Business and Human Rights Accelerator now, and then also some of the other resources that we have available and that you can ask me questions about after. So, I think the main thing here, and even if we think about the legislation as well, is how do we know, and this is a quote from the late John Draghi, no company that I know of has ever said we don't respect human rights. My question was, how do you know that you respect human rights? Can you show that you do? And do you have systems in place that would allow you to back that claim? So it's easy for business to say, no, we're not disrespecting human rights. We know that. But unfortunately, it's not good enough to just say it. You have to be able to show that you are following a process to understand where you are as a business, and that if there are any risks, you are being proactive in identifying them and taking action. Because these are people and human rights and risks that we are talking about. So these are risks to people, not risks to business. And how are we proactive in that? And when I think of the Business and Human Rights Accelerator, it's really supporting you to answer those questions, to really be able to talk about whether it is in your reporting, sustainability report, integrated report, annual report, human rights report, whichever reporting mechanisms you are using, you are able to talk about this is the process that we are following to understand our risks, and these are the actions that we're taking to prevent them. But also, in doing so, where we have identified actual impacts, this is how we are remedying those. So not only about prevention, but where you identify impacts, how are you supporting the people that have been, whose rights have been abused? Zoom. Okay. So on the Business and Human Rights Accelerator, we are in our second year now. We started initially with recruitment in 2022. And the high-level objectives of the Business and Human Rights Accelerator is to support you to know where you are in this journey. So to understand the alignment with the UN guiding principles, understand the alignment with the 10 principles, but really just to know where you are, because you cannot improve if you're not sure where you are on that journey. Then to set the bar, where do you want to be? You know where you are, but where is it that you want to be? How far do you need to go? Are you a company that's really just starting out and you have a full journey ahead of you? Or you're a company that really has a lot in place huge multinational, have put many things in place already, but actually you need to test, the assumptions that you've put in place. You need to talk to people about the actions that you are taking. Are they relevant for the stakeholders that you're talking to? Then, of course, you need to close those gaps. Where you are and where you're going might be a big gap in between. And what are the actions that you could put in place to actually address that? And really excitingly, I think, about not only the Business and Human Rights Accelerator, about many accelerators that we have, is that there's really an opportunity to connect and learn from other businesses. So what are your peers doing? They might be doing slightly better than you. They might be a little bit further on the journey, or they might not be. But there is absolutely a lot of learning that occurs between companies, between participants, but also just you're not alone. It can seem like a very lonely journey. You as an individual, maybe a sustainability individual in a company, working in your office there on your own, you're not alone. There are many other sustainability partners and people and peers that are going through the same things. And so understanding that and talking about the journey actually really helps as well. So those are the objectives of the accelerator. Just a little bit about where we are. So the Business and Human Rights Accelerator, as I said, it was launched in September last year. Round 1 has come to a close. The scope of it was across about 57 countries. We had 665, in fact, we had 850 companies that initially registered. We had about 665 companies that were really engaged in the program, and we had over 1,300 participants enrolled onto the academy, also engaged in all of the activities that the accelerator had. When we did the survey, we know that 95% of participants would absolutely recommend the accelerator to others. 92% of them have either started or are in progress of developing an action plan based on their participation in the accelerator. We had 627 participants actually submit due diligence plans, action plans, and they received their certificates of completion. 86% of participants either really strongly or somewhat agreed that the accelerator has helped them progress their human rights journey in the organization. And about 82% of them strongly or somewhat agreed that it has helped them understand the responsibility to respect human rights. So you'll see that majority of the companies and participants that participated in the accelerator, at least more than 80%, have actually now understood the responsibility, and that alone has helped them progress the journey. Beyond even developing action plans, and then not only developing action plans, but for those companies that already had something going, it helped them progress that as well. I'd like to share just a few of the testimonials. And for me, the testimonials are about companies asking, I've just started out, is this right for me? Or we already quite matured, do I really need to do this? And we have the voices of participants actually saying both. One of my favorites here is we joined the accelerator course because we want to learn more how we can improve our current systems and processes. So they have systems and processes, but they've joined the accelerator to actually understand how they can improve what they already have. This other one, BHR provided me a safe space for open dialogue with peers and learn together. Again, so it's that like I'm alone in my organization, having that safe space to actually talk to other colleagues about what is happening and the struggles that we are having. And then we knew that protecting human rights is a responsibility we have as a company, but was missing a formal structure to our due diligence process. So you might be sitting there thinking, well, we have pieces of this, and we are doing some training within our workforce. We have a supplier code of conduct on this side, but how do we actually put those pieces together so that we have a structured due diligence process within the organization? and that the accelerator can help you do as well. So round 2 is where we are now. We are currently recruiting for round 2. We have a wide scope in terms of countries that are going to be running the accelerator this year. You can see it really goes from east to west, so we're quite excited about that. And beyond these countries, we will also have a global track. And the global track is for the companies, members of the UN Global Compact, where the local network is not necessarily running the accelerator in their country, but the company would still like to participate. And so what we try to do here is really give access to as many companies that want to participate as possible. And the reason is because our responsibility is to support as many companies as possible to be on this journey and to move from commitment to action. Just the timeline, if you have not yet joined the recruitment of the accelerator, and really don't know anything about it, this is what the timeline is going to look like next year. So if you do sign up, we start with the actual work in February next year, and we go all the way into July. It's a 6-month program, and it covers, there are these global deep dives that talk specifically about the process, but then we're also going to bring in specific topical Ask the Expert sessions where you can learn more about the legislation, evolving legislation. You can learn more about if you're a financial institution and there's slight nuances in your human rights due diligence process that you want to think about, we will have a deep dive for that. And then we also have another Ask the Expert session with the International Labour Organization, because a lot of the risks that obviously come up are labor related. And so we have a great specific session where you can ask the Business and Human Rights Help Desk of the ILO some very specific questions. So that's what the timeline is going to look like. It's all very much planned out already. So if you're unsure, there's exact dates in terms of the global sessions. The local sessions, you will have to discuss with your local network, but these are the global sessions. I'm not going to go into the dates right now. I think just to say that we have a global information session next week on the 18th of October that you are welcome to join. And the 10 a.m. ET session, or New York time, always has Portuguese and Spanish live translation, and we've also added French live translation as well. So if you're not comfortable in English or you have colleagues that are not, we do have the live translation as well. So I just want to show a little bit more about these new sessions that we're going to be including. So remembering that the accelerator covers the human rights due diligence process. So we'll take you from understanding the core concepts all the way through to grievance mechanisms and remedy. It is issue agnostic, which means we don't talk about specific issues in the accelerator. We help you work through the process. However, there have been requests for sessions on specific topics, and that's why we've included these 3. So as said, you know, the human rights legislative landscape has been changing quite rapidly, and especially for companies like yourselves that are based in the EU, the CSDDD and the CSRD in terms of reporting and your due diligence process are going to be really important. And so we're going to look at what the legislation says across the world. So not only for the EU, but definitely focusing on that as well, so that we can understand that space. The other session, as I said, we're going to have is particularly for financial institutions. We have found that our colleagues from financial institutions have said that there are some nuances that they'd like to understand. And I think you know, we've answered to that, and we're going to have a session specifically for that. Just to also say that it's not only about financial institutions as a organization themselves and all of the processes that they have, but also the opportunity to use their leverage and how they influence and how they vet other organizations in their financial decisions. So that's going to be quite interesting. And then as we hosted in round one, the session with the International Labour Organization, where you can really talk to very specific issues that that you could be encountering. Sorry. So I'd like to show you some of the other resources that we have available. Not every company can take part in an accelerator. It is a 6-month commitment. You know, we ask for 2 participants plus an ambassador. So it is a long, it is quite a bit of commitment. So there are other resources, business and human rights resources that we have available as well. And so the BHR Navigator, which discusses various scenarios and case studies that you can go into. This is open source, so anybody can really look at it, and you can read about experiences of other companies, the challenges that they had, and then how they managed to mitigate that. There is, I think, 10 scenarios, 10 issues, and then you can see how that, if it aligns with some of the issues that you're having in your organization, or perhaps you just need to look at some examples to help you think through the issues that you might be having as well. Especially when you're starting out, it's difficult to see that across your value chain, but when you look at the issues, you might be able to identify those within your own value chain. So that is one of the resources that we have. I also wanted to share the UN LGBTIQ plus standards gap analysis. I was looking at it again this morning. It is very much, you might know, the WEPs, the Women Empowerment Principles. They have a gap analysis tool as well. This is quite similar in that it really helps you identify those areas, those gap areas within your organization. So it might be some of the things that you need to think through. You haven't necessarily done so yet, but it'll take you through understanding all the way from leadership, to marketplace and so on, in thinking through the issues that employees could be going through in your organization, and what are some of the practices you could put in place. So these are all the various resources that we have for you as an organization to operationalize human rights within your organization. Then, of course, there are many e-learnings or on-demand courses across the academy. One of my favorites, and we use this in the accelerator, is how to operationalize the UN guiding principles. So there are 4 modules. If you can't do a full accelerator, you can really look at these modules. They set duration is 30 minutes, but of course, depending on if you have little breaks in between, they can take 30 minutes to an hour. But you will be able to walk yourself then through all of this in your own time. I think we're getting to the end of the slides now, and then we'll open for questions. What we're asking is that with all of these resources, the call to action is for you as an organization to move from commitment to action. You might have a policy in place, you might have a statement that's been made from your CEO, but how are you operationalizing this in your organization? With legislation coming up, you're going to need to operationalize this. You're going to need to show that you have a robust due diligence process. And so don't sit on commitment. Make sure that you actually move that forward into action. And if you're not sure how to do that, these are the various resources that can help you. We need to look at a principles-based approach to business operations. It's not only about what you do in business, it's about how you do it. And that is where looking at the 10 principles and the UN guiding principles ensures that how you do business is responsible and considering the human rights of people along the way. Put people at the center of your risk-based approach. Again, coming from business, I know that we are very eager to do risk matrix, but usually they are based on what are the risks to company, looking at the value chain, but what are the risks to you as an organization? In the business and human rights approach, we ask, what are the risks to people and planet, not only to the business? And the risks to people and planet are, of course, risk to business as well. So it's really changing that lens. And then this is the critical shift that lies at the heart of human rights due diligence and represents the best way for business to contribute to sustainable development. I think that is my last slide. I spoke quite a bit. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can
it
see
was
everyone.
wonderful, Nicole. Thanks for your excellent presentation. I don't know if you have any questions, so feel free to ask and put it on chat or just saying it out loud. Yes, Eduardo, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Hi, Nicole.
Morning.
Thank you. Nice to
Hi.
meet you. I have a question about the implementation and use of this tool. How is it going for poor countries? Because, of course, in poor countries, it's much more riskier to adopt these requirements. They have, I don't know, tougher labor markets, poorer regulations, etc. And this works if you have a global value chain or supply chain vision, right? Because it's not just if richer countries that they implement this, but this needs to influence the rest. How is it going for those countries or globally, if you want to go there?
Yeah, excellent question. And I think I want to start off with, I think something I said quite early in the presentation, that being human makes you a human rights expert, meaning that we all know how we want to be treated. So yes, the scope is broad, and you have to, the UN guiding principle says that you have to look at your risks across the value chain, but you have to start somewhere. So especially for SMEs or smaller organizations that don't have the resources, there are so many global resources out there. You can look at what the larger businesses are doing. You can look at what is happening in your sector. You don't have to do that investigation necessarily yourself. You know, if you're in a certain sector, if you're a high risk sector, chances are there's going to be risk for you as an organization as well. So as a larger organization would put many resources into going through this process, putting money into expert partners, looking at these various large and expensive resources before they start putting action into place. You don't have to do that. It starts at home. It starts with looking at your own workforce. What is the barriers and risks that lie right here? Start close and then work your way out. And as you work your way out, yes, it gets further from your own supply chain and more into your value chain, but then start using the other resources that exist. Look at the sector research that exists. Look at what the other larger organizations in your sector are doing. So you don't have to do everything yourself. Talk to other smaller organizations. And then also just to add to that, besides where it's a small or less resourced organization, what about countries where governments are not upholding the state duty to protect, right? The UN guiding principle says that you as a business still have the responsibility to respect. So you cannot say that because government is not doing what it needs to, as a company, I can sit back and watch from a distance. You, in your own small way, still have that responsibility. So starting out small, using the resources, the free resources that are available, the research, the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, the ILO Help Desk, which is free. There are many other resources which you can use, which is not going to cost you as an organization, to at least know what those risks are. And then start working on a plan. Okay, I'm going to do this first, then that. This is going to cost me. Where can I partner on that one? So there's either way, there's no excuse. You have to start somewhere.
Very well, thank you.
It's a
I don't
pleasure.
know if there are any more questions. Can put it on the chat. If you want to say it in Portuguese, I can translate to Nicole. It's okay. Eu posso traduzir algumas questões, se for preciso, não há problema.
I must have been very clear.
Yeah, you're very clear. So I
Oh,
will
very
leave it.
muddy.
Oh, we have a question on chat. So I don't know if you want to read it or can I read it loud?
Yeah, when we talk about operationalization, what is meant? Audits, for example. Yeah, absolutely. So audits are one part of operationalizing, but for example, you have a policy. But a policy is a piece of paper, or it's sitting on your website, or it's in a code of conduct. But how are you actually making sure that you, first of all, do people know about it within your company? So are people trained? Because there could be a policy that one department wrote, but no one else knows about it. So are you sure that other people in your organization know about it? That's already starting to operationalize. So now you're starting to embed that across the organization. Then to understand what does that mean for the various departments. So what does that mean, especially for procurement? I mean, that's a big space that really needs to understand where they're purchasing from. You know, what is the transparency in your supply chain? What does that mean for human resources within your own organization? Because what is happening in your workforce? You know, is there a non-discrimination policy? And if there is, how are you operationalizing that? You know, is there training for your employees in your organization? Is there a grievance mechanism so that employees know who to talk to or where to report to if they're having issues or if they're experiencing discrimination in the organization? Do you have that in place? So that is what we mean with operationalizing. Whatever you've said your company is doing, and by the way, committing to the UN Global Compact means that you are upholding those 10 principles. So you have to think about what that means in your company, and then making sure that you're actually living that throughout your organization. That is what we mean by operationalize. Just another example again in procurement. So perhaps you have a code of conduct, and so you are purchasing from a supplier. There's a code of conduct, and you sign a contract, and there's the code of conduct. And now you hope that they're going to be operationalizing that in their own organization. You need to check, you know, you need to be having constant conversations with your supplier. It's not okay to just say, here's the code of conduct, and you know, and I hope you implement. You actually need to be building relationships with your supply chain, with the suppliers. And yes, it might be tier one. So it's the initial, you know, the first row that you purchase from. But in your conversations with them, you're encouraging them to talk to their suppliers. That is what we mean by operationalizing. Talking about it, building relationships, making sure that people are actually doing what those statements and policies are saying. And of course, that takes a lot of effort. Takes a lot of effort. As Eduardo asked about, you know, where there's less resources, less capacity. It takes effort, but not money necessarily to build a relationship. You have expertise as a company. How are you supporting your suppliers with less capacity to do so, for example? And you can do that by training. So again, not necessarily costing you money, but yes, effort and time from your own employees to bring that knowledge across to your perhaps suppliers or even customers. You know, how are we that is how we operationalize. Sorry, that was a long answer, but there's so many examples of how to operationalize the principles. Bye, Paulo.
And yeah, the Accelerator program also gives you the opportunity to speak with other companies that are facing the same problems, and obviously you can share your experience and learn from what the other companies are doing. So yeah, it's great on that aspect as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know if there are any more questions. Feel free to ask. Otherwise, if you have further questions, you can reach us by email. I'll leave you our email. Nicole, can I share the emails? Your
Yeah,
email?
absolutely. You can share the BHR Accelerator at UN Global Compact, or I can type that one in.
If you want to type it, I will leave also a flyer about the program. I'll leave it here for you to consult as well. Yeah, there you go.
And possibly, Diogo, maybe to send out after this, I don't have it on me right now, but there's an information session on the 18th, which is next week, Wednesday. So if you're interested in joining the accelerator, you know, and learning more about how to operationalize the UNGPs, we'll have a big information session talking very specifically about, you know, who should join, the time commitments, all that kind of detail. So you're welcome to join that session. And we will have two, the deadline to join is the 15th of December. And we will have 2 time zones, and we will always have, the later time zone will have Portuguese, Spanish, and French translation as well. So you're welcome to join that, if you prefer not the English.
Yeah, and we can basically stick together the link with the presentation when we'll send it to you.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay. So I believe there are no more questions. So yeah, thank you, Nicole, once again.
It's a
for your
pleasure.
time and for your presentation.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, and hope to see you at the info session on the 18th, for those that want to learn a bit more. Thank you for your
Yeah.
time.
Thank you
And
so
thank
much.
you for
Have a great
having me.
weekend.
It's a pleasure.
See ya.